Hey everyone, Hannah Levin here with Heartfelt Well-Being, and I am going to be sharing with you today on this Tuesday Talk with Hannah about balancing kapha for springtime. So I invite you to ask questions along the way and to share your experiences if you're here live or if you're watching the replay, chime in. What is your experience this season? And there's so much that we can learn. Now, you all hopefully know at this point that Ayurveda is really focused on aligning with the rhythms of nature. And one of the biggest rhythms that we can align with is the change in the seasons. We just had the spring equinox, so we just shifted technically from winter into spring. But depending on where you live, it might feel a little different. Some of you are still in winter time. There may still be snow on the ground and nothing much has changed to make it feel like spring. Others of you are in places where it's warm and maybe feeling almost like summer already, and flowers are blooming and gardens are growing. So we have to recognize when this shift happens to spring for each of us where we live. Where I live right now in Floyd, Virginia, it's definitely feeling like spring. There's little buds on the trees. The daffodils just started blooming. Our forsythia is starting. So it's feeling like spring here. But regardless, there's some principles that we can practice whenever spring happens for us. And we can understand these principles in terms of Ayurveda. So, Ayurveda, just as a little review, is based on 5 elements. And those elements are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And then we have these 3 energies, or what we could call constitutions, which we call doshas, which are made up of 2 of the elements. So, Vata is made up of air and space, ether. Pitta is made up of fire and water, and Kapha is made up of earth and water. And each season has a doshic predominance. And in Ayurveda, guess what? There's only 3 seasons. There's Kapha season, Pitta season, and Vata season. And winter is basically divided in half. The first half of winter is cold and dry, and the second half of winter is cool and wet. So the cool and wet part of winter is what we've experienced. Some of you might still be experiencing that. And then we come into springtime. All of that is considered Kapha season. And Kapha, made up of earth and water, is going to show up in our lives in different ways. Now, depending on the environment where you live, Kapha might look a little various in how it shows up, and also how it shows up for you personally, whether you have a lot of kapha in your constitution or a lot of kapha imbalance that has crept in over the years will affect you more. Kapha will affect those who have more kapha in them, either as prakriti, your base nature, or as vikriti, which is your imbalance, or where you've gotten off your path of ease, your perfect health. So today I'm going to talk about some ways that kapha might be showing up in our lives and some remedies with diet and lifestyle practices that we can utilize to help balance kapha. So the idea is that we can all be happy and healthy in every single season of the year if we have these tools. So how might kapha be showing up in you right now or in those around you? And those of you watching live, if you want to chime in, I see there's at least one Vitality Circle member here. So if you want to chime in with your answers, feel free. So kapha might show up. Let's look at the body first. How might kapha show up in the body? It will show up in terms of sluggishness in the digestive tract, meaning that you might feel like it takes longer to digest food. And maybe your food feels like it's sitting in your stomach like a rock after you eat it. It might show up in sluggish elimination. meaning that your elimination will take longer or be less often or feel like it's not necessarily in proportion to how much you're eating, like a strange form of constipation. So you're not able to go to the bathroom, but it doesn't feel like you're moving all the waste out. It might show up in your body as congestion, mucus. So that might be in the sinuses. It might be in the back of the throat. It might be goopy eyes when you wake up in the morning. It might be in your stool too. You might see mucus in the stool. It might show up in the body as weight gain or water retention. That last part of winter is a time when we often gain weight. We may not know to switch from eating more grounding, augmenting, building of tissue foods like we were eating in the fall and the early winter. And so we end up gaining weight. Now it's typical to gain a little bit of weight in the winter and lose a little bit of weight in the summer, like 3 to 5 pounds, say, average for most people. And that's healthy to gain a little weight in the winter and to lose a little weight in the summer. If it's more than that and there's not a nice flow and fluctuation that you can trust in your own body, then you might have some imbalances that need attending to. So if you have put on some extra weight in the past month or so and you're feeling drawn to things that add to that, and I'll talk about that in a moment with foods and movement, that is a kapha imbalance. So how might kapha imbalance show up in the mind? We just talked about the body. Let's look at the mind. Kapha imbalance can show up as lethargy, brain fog, feeling unmotivated or uninspired. It can show up as a desire to stick with what's known instead of venturing into what's new. And attachment to the past as well. There can be kind of things coming up for us that are triggers for emotional things that have happened in the past or actual material items that we've connected to in the past. So the ultimate kind of experience of too much kapha in the mind or emotional realm is depression. Just feeling uninspired and like nothing really matters. If you've been depressed before, it's that feeling of like nothing really matters. And so there's a lack of motivation and a lack of care. It's just kind of going numb. So you might be experiencing some of these things, not even constantly, but here and there. You might be desiring to sleep more, which is a kapha response as well. That heavy energy of earth and water can be really supportive of sleep this time of year, but we want to make sure we're not sleeping too much. And we also might feel like we're not motivated to move our bodies in lifestyle practices. So we might struggle to get our blood moving to build warmth and heat in the body and to um, initiate something new if that's something that you need to do after the winter. So when we look at every dosha in Ayurveda, there are what are called gunas or qualities. And these are the descriptive words for each of the doshas. And I recently put out a newsletter looking at the gunas of kapha. So I encourage you to check that out on my website, heartfeltwellbeing.com. Click on blogs, and then there's one about gunas. So the gunas for kapha season or for kapha are slow, cloudy, wet, static, heavy, soft. So when we experience those things like slow, like you can kind of feel sometimes this, or maybe a lot of the time, this time of year, like you're moving through molasses. It's slow. It takes you a long time to like get going in the morning or to accomplish tasks that maybe in the summer or the fall don't feel like such a big deal to you. The cool quality stays from the winter, and we still need to make sure that we're staying warm. And so that coolness is there. We might feel it in our hands and feet. We might feel it just in our um, environment around us. And cloudy can show up as brain fog. It can show up as cloudiness in our bodily liquids, like our pee might be a little more cloudy, our stool might be a little more cloudy. We might have more cloudiness in our mucus when we blow our nose, or goop in our eyes, as I mentioned before, or even cloudiness on the coating on the tongue when we scrape our tongues. If you're not already tongue scraping, start. A good thing to do, especially during Kapha season. Clear out the gunk that releases off of the tongue while you sleep. You want to clear that off in the morning. So the cloudy quality is showing up in various ways. You can see how that's showing up for you. The wet quality shows up in terms of we have more moisture naturally in the body. So you might find that you need less in terms of hydration on the skin topically. If you're oiling or using lotion, you might need less this time of year. You also might notice that you sweat a little more easily, that there's a wetness that is inherent in your body. And you might notice that you retain water, that you're not expelling it as easily. There's some water retention going on. So your body naturally becomes a little more wet. Now, all of these things I want to re-emphasize are going to be more true if you have kapha in your constitution, less true if you have more vata or pitta in your constitution, but will still affect you to a certain degree. So just notice, tune in to what your experience is and see what is true for you. The heavy quality of kapha shows up in lethargy or weight gain, and just that kind of inertia that can show up in the body and the mind. And then the static quality is very similar. So it's the opposite of movement, it's staying still. So the lack of motivation, the desire to just sit on the couch versus go for a run or something like that, that static quality will show up. It'll also show up just in the body in terms of things moving slower, as I mentioned earlier. And then soft. Soft is this earth and water elements coming together. We imagine mud. Mud is incredibly fertile too, I want to say. So the soft quality shows up in that like receptive nature of being a little more even emotional this time of year. And maybe your body has become a little softer through the winter. And so all of these gunas we want to balance with the wisdom of opposites. This is the basis of everything in Ayurveda. We want to balance with the wisdom of opposites. So where we feel slow, heavy, static, dull, we want to bring in movement. We want to create something that's a little more fast, that is more sharp, engaging, rigorous. So when we look at cold, we want to bring in warmth. And we can do that in a few different ways. When we look at cloudy quality, we want to bring in clarity. We want to clear out the fogginess. And when we look at wetness, we want to bring in dry quality. Mobile quality as opposed to static, and then firm quality as opposed to soft. So what are some of the ways we could do that? And again, feel free to chime in if you have some guesses as to how can we balance the gunas of kapha with the wisdom of opposites. So bringing in fast, we can bring in more vigorous movement. This also helps with combating cold. We can bring in heat. So moving the body more creates more fast moving energy. It creates movement. It creates warmth. Kapha season is the best time to exercise hard. And it's the time of year when we least feel motivated. Isn't that the irony of so many things in Ayurveda? It's like we have to overcome our own inertia. This is the time of year to exercise hard, to sweat, to build heat in the body. Things like cardio exercise, weight training, things like that. Yeah, Jane says, I'm finding a desire to take a walk first thing. Yes. And the cool thing about kapha is that once that energy, once that momentum has built to create movement, it will often have energy of its own to maintain. It's just overcoming that inertia initially to get it going, to get it started, that can be really, really hard oftentimes. So movement is really important. Another way that we can counteract the cold quality of kapha is heating foods. So, foods that are both hot in temperature and hot in spice. One of my Ayurvedic teachers used to say, maybe she still does, say, spring is the time to eat Mexican food. Now, I want to qualify that Mexican food is not queso and lots of meat, and it's not all the cheese dips and everything. Like traditional Mexican food is beans, which are great for this time of year, which are astringent. They're drying, they make you gassy. You are experiencing that drying quality in your body. So beans are helpful to eat during this wet time of the year, as well as hot, spicy things like cayenne, chili powder, jalapenos. Those are great foods to be having during this time of year. So think about bringing in spice. This could be mild digestive spices as well, things like cumin, cinnamon, things like that, that help warm the digestion slightly, but it could also be really spicy things depending on your tolerance for it. You pittas out there might not be able to handle quite as much spice, although you might love it. Then you want to be aware of what your tolerance level is for actual intense spice. But think about if we look at the congestive quality of kapha, if we look at like the mucus and the stagnation, and we bring in this heat from the food that we're eating, we're going to help melt that stagnation. You all probably know, like, if you have congested sinuses and you eat some cayenne or wasabi, right, or a jalapeno, or even have like really spicy ginger tea, that it helps release the congestion in your sinuses. Whoa, that's the heat from that food melting the congestion and it helps move it out. The same is true with congestion from that's brought on with added weight in the body. When we eat spicier food, it can help release the stagnation of accumulated tissues. And so we want to look at eating spicy and astringent, which is drying, that's what the beans are, and bitter foods during kapha season. Of course, you're probably drawn to foods, if you're out of balance at all, that aggravate kapha. So foods that do that, and hands up, if this is you, you might be drawn to all these kapha foods right now because it's the imbalance of the season. Foods that create more kapha are going to be foods that are rich in dairy, sugar, and grain. So baked goods, anything with dairy, milk, cheese, ice cream, sugar. Ice cream is a dairy and sugar. things that are very comforting to you. You might find yourself reaching for more comfort foods recently, things that feel like a reward to you. Even salty things, because salt is hydrophilic, which means it retains water in your body. So salty foods too can create a kapha imbalance. So you might be saying, "Oh my gosh, that's totally me. I just want the grilled cheese and the like cheesecake and mashed potatoes with lots of sour cream and butter these days." And just recognize those things as kapha imbalance. And it's totally natural. Like in each season, we are often drawn, unless we know this wisdom of Ayurveda, we are drawn to things that put us into further imbalance. So, as Jane just mentioned, bringing in greens and beans are great for this season. So, all leafy greens, the more bitter, the better for greens. And what's really cool is that this time of year, there's wild greens that are growing in our environments that are there to help us. It's true. Those plants show up to help us. And what are they doing? They're helping us with their bitter and astringent qualities, and sometimes pungent too. There's some bitter green or springtime greens, wild greens that are kind of peppery. They're there to help us clear out the liver and the gallbladder. And that's what we do in the spring. We really want to detox the body from the gunk and the sludge that has built up over the winter from eating so many augmenting foods, foods that build tissue. And that's what we need through the winter to get through the winter. But in the springtime, we need to clear out the stagnation that has built up, probably from less movement as well. So you probably have not been, going for big hikes or bike rides or getting out on whatever trails where you are, or going for a run or doing exercise or even going to exercise classes maybe over the winter. So we want to start moving the body, getting outside, balancing, and to have the balance of the gunas through these pieces. Um, so so yeah, back to the gunas. I went on quite a tangent there. Um, so yeah, having that impetus to clear out from the bitter spring green. So, oh yeah, let me go back to that. Woo, just went on a little little tangent in my mind. Okay. So in the springtime, what might be growing in your environment that is a wild edible that is really supportive for liver detoxing, might be things like dandelion, purslane, plantain, nettles, chickweed. What else? There's more that will be coming, but those are things that are like early, generally early, things that are really helpful for clearing the liver. So finding those, make sure you're gathering them from a place that's not sprayed with pesticides, because you don't want to be eating those. Um, and putting those into your diet, you could put them into soups or stews or smoothies, and have some of that wild green vibrancy, clearing, medicinal energy coming into your body. So that helps that cloudy quality clear out as well. The cloudy quality of the sludge that's in the gallbladder clear out. So bitter is really, really helpful there. So then we have the wet quality. We want to dry out. So again, with diet, we can eat a little more drying foods like beans, even some things depending on how wet your body tends to be. If you can handle a little more dry, this could be a time of year where you might be able to have something like popcorn or rice cakes, or things that are really drying to the system. Now, if you have more of a Vata constitution, that's still not a good idea. Okay. But drying things in general things that, so going to a sauna or something, not going to the steam room, we don't want wet and hot, we just want hot and dry. So going to a desert, it's good. Sitting in a sauna, and really drying out. So some herbs that you could also have that help with drying are ginger. Well, ginger is really the main one. Wasabi can also help with that, but ginger is like our go-to kapha balancing culinary food spice herb, whatever you want to call it. So ginger has a heating, it's pungent and drying, and it is so helpful. If you start feeling congestion coming on, if you start feeling like you're getting sluggish in your digestion, make some fresh ginger tea. Slice up some fresh ginger, boil a pot of water, and boil the ginger in the pot of water for 20 minutes or so. You can keep a pot going on your stove and add more water as it diminishes and just keep boiling that same ginger. That is so helpful during kapha season. You can just put ginger on IV drip. Again, if you have a lot of pitta sensitivity, this might create loose stools and acid reflux. So don't do it if you have too high of a pitta imbalance. Okay, so we've got heavy and light next. So we want to move from heavy to light. So this is eating lighter foods. So instead of having like soups or stews that have a meat or dairy base, or even tomato base sometimes, we want to move towards having things that are like a light, clear broth, like a ginger broth or a miso broth, things that are a lot lighter in color, in texture, and in the stomach, in the system. So lightness can also come in our activities in terms of the movement that we're doing. We want to do things that get us up off the ground. Even jumping on a trampoline can be really helpful this time of year. So we're having this experience of lightness, of buoyancy. We want to bring that in. The static quality of, and then we want to balance with mobile. We kind of already talked about that with exercise and getting things moving in the body and inside and outside the body. So moving the body, exercise, or if you're allergic to that word, call it something else. We call it in the Vitality Circle breath body practices. So we're moving our breath and our bodies. It could be dance, it could be gymnastics, it could be whatever lights you up, but you definitely want to get moving this season, more so than either of the other seasons, than Pitta or Vata season. This is the season to move. And it's really helpful to do that with other people. The energy of Kapha is the energy of connectivity, of connection. It's sticky. We want to connect. And so, in a good way, not sticky, yucky. But when we think about how we can use that as support for our movement, setting up things like meeting friends to go for a walk or signing up for a class at the gym or something like that where there's other people involved and there's accountability, that is very helpful for all of us during kapha season. And you might have noticed that, I mean, especially with things easing up a little bit with the pandemic, that you might feel way more inspired towards connectivity right now, to connect with friends, to connect with old schoolmates or whatever it is. Like the connectivity might be there, so take advantage of it, but use it to get you moving, not to stagnate. And then soft and firm. So soft comes in with kapha season, so moving will create more firmness. Another way that we can really bring in firm, which isn't in the body per se, is to bring in clearer boundaries. So kapha season can also be a time when we look at what's underneath the surface, kind of buried beneath the mud, and to clear any stagnation in the liver. And emotionally, that shows up as anger. And so if we can clear out anything that's kind of residual, things that we're angry about. And we can create clearer boundaries, not from a super angry place, but just from a place of like, this is where I am clear about how I want to exist. This is really, really important. We can create more firm boundaries and structure that will only benefit us. Remember my saying, structure creates freedom. So as we create more structure, we'll have more freedom. Oh my goodness, I could talk all day long about this. There's so much to share. We're at the end of our time though, and I just want to share two more things. One is that spring is the energy of birth, right? And so we think, oh, spring, it's light and airy and there's flowers blooming and everything's lovely. And we can tend to project that to the outside world and then think, what is wrong with me? I just want to take a nap, or I'm feeling really foggy brained, or I am not motivated. And I just want to acknowledge that birth takes a lot of energy and focus, and you gotta want it. Anybody that's actually given birth before, it's not just like, ta-da, everything is easy and fine, right? Like there's pain, and it's transformational pain. It's pain that we're willing to undergo in order to have the outcome that is an amazing outcome, right? If you're actually giving birth to a person, you get a person, you get a child. How cool is that? When we're in springtime, I want you to really keep in mind this transformational inertia, or the threshold that can feel like, oh, I don't want to cross that. I don't have the energy. I don't really want that. And summon up your strength to go for it, to have a little more oomph, right? We gotta want it. This is the season where we summon our inner cheerleaders and we say, yes, we want to work a little harder. We want to, run an extra 15 minutes today. We want to do a little bit more, and to feel how that benefits us. So that energy of springtime can go towards the stagnation, or it can go towards the excitement of transformational energy. So I hope that's exciting to you. And if you are interested in really tuning in to what is possible in balancing all the gunas for the spring, I invite you to join our spring detox, which starts on Monday, the 28th. And we will be looking at specifically spring, but also balancing with the wisdom of opposites in all ways that are showing up for you, clearing things out, and you'll have the support to do it, body, mind, and spirit. It's super fun in a community, and it can be a little challenging at times, which is why it's important to do it with a community, because if we do it by ourselves, sometimes we just give up. So join us. I'll post the link with this live for our spring detox. If you have any questions, post them below. Thank you all for being here for our balancing Kapha video. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day and week and Kapha season. Don't feel defeated by it. You have the tools. Try things out with food and lifestyle practices, energy and self-talk. It'll make a huge difference for you. All right, take care.